You're at a bustling amusement park, the sun is setting, laughter fills the air, and the thrill of the rides is palpable. Amidst the excitement, a teenager captures a seemingly innocent photo on a roller coaster. But this simple act sets off a chain of events that spirals into a national crisis. In just moments, an FBI alert is triggered, and what was meant to be a fun day turns into a nightmare. You're probably wondering, how could a single photo lead to such chaos? Well, that's exactly what we're about to uncover. This isn't just a story about a teenager and a photo, it's about the darker side of our digital age, where every click can have unforeseen consequences. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand how a simple upload can unravel lives and why it's crucial to be aware of the digital footprints we leave behind. Her name was Mia Caldwell, a 17-year-old high school senior from Charlotte, North Carolina, who had been looking forward to the end-of-summer trip with her closest friends for months. They had saved up, planned everything down to the color-coordinated hoodies, and landed on a visit to Horizon Hills Amusement Park, one of the East Coast's most famous thrill destinations. If you've ever been to a park like that, you know the energy: crowded walkways soaked in the smell of popcorn and funnel cake, the air charged with screams from the coasters above, and teens buzzing with the mix of freedom and adrenaline. Mia was no different. Outgoing, athletic, and deeply loved by her small but tight-knit group, she wasn't the type to go unnoticed. In fact, her Instagram had recently started gaining traction after she began sharing raw, unfiltered moments from her life, the kind that made her followers feel like they knew her personally. Her stories felt real, her smile was magnetic, and it wasn't hard to see why people were drawn in. But in the weeks leading up to that fateful day, something about Mia had changed, something subtle, yet unnerving if you were really paying attention. Her closest friends Ava, Jordan, and Micah had noticed it first. The late-night calls that Mia would suddenly ignore, the way she started glancing over her shoulder more often, the way she locked her phone with a new passcode and wouldn't leave it unattended even for a second. She stopped tagging locations in her posts, started using throwback photos instead of real-time content, and once snapped at Ava when she tried to look at a message that popped up during lunch. "It's nothing," she had said, brushing it off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It wasn't like her to be secretive, but then again, it wasn't like her to lie either. The trip to Horizon Hills was supposed to be a way for everyone to reset, leave the weird vibes behind, scream away the stress, and make new memories before senior year kicked off. But hindsight, as they say, paints everything in a much darker hue. That day at the park, the group had hit nearly every major ride by 3 p.m. They were drenched from the log flume, hoarse from the scream zones, and completely hyped for the park's signature ride, the Vortex. Known for its 13-story drop and onboard photo capture mid-loop, the Vortex was a must. As they approached the queue, Mia had lagged behind, typing furiously into her phone. Ava later said she thought Mia was texting a cousin, someone she had recently mentioned staying in contact with after a family trip out west. But the truth is, no one had ever seen Mia with this so-called cousin. And it would be that very message, sent just seconds before the ride launched, that would mark the last time Mia was seen acting normal. The Vortex snapped their ride photo at the peak of the upside-down loop, just like always. The screen at the exit flashed the row-by-row images as riders poured out, cheering and fixing their windblown hair. But this time, something was different. A Horizon Hills employee quietly stepped up, typed something into a handheld device, and without making a scene, pulled the photo offline. Within an hour, federal agents would be on the park grounds. The photo had triggered a hit in a national security database, an image match tied to an ongoing investigation, and somehow, Mia Caldwell's face was now at the center of it. What came next unraveled everything her friends thought they knew. Law enforcement wouldn't say much at first, only that the image flagged a potential connection to a person of interest. The photo wasn't shared publicly. No alerts were sent to media. It all happened quietly, too quietly. A park known for social media hype and viral moments was now under silent lockdown, at least in part of the grounds. That night, as guests exited the park unaware, a black SUV pulled up to the employee entrance. Mia, still in her park hoodie, was escorted off the premises with 2 agents in plain clothes. She didn't look scared. She didn't say a word. She just stared at her phone, clutched in her hand like it was the only thing she trusted anymore. From there, things spiraled. The next morning, Ava, Jordan, and Micah woke up to find Mia's social media wiped clean, every photo, every story, every comment gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her parents, when reached by local news, seemed genuinely shocked and said they hadn't heard from their daughter. But those close to the situation started to question that. How does a teenager vanish into federal custody over a theme park photo without her family being looped in? The more people asked questions, the fewer answers they received. Speculation flooded the internet. Was MIA secretly involved in something bigger than she let on? Did she know someone on the FBI's radar? Or had she simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, caught in the background of something she couldn't have predicted? Reddit threads lit up with theories. Some claimed to have seen MIA arguing with a man in a hoodie near the park's locker stations an hour before the ride. Others said they remembered a drone flying unusually close to the vortex around the same time. Then there were those who dug into her recent likes and follows, noticing a string of cryptic accounts she had interacted with, pages that posted vague, anonymous content about surveillance, government overreach, and something referred to only as the data shadow. It all sounded like conspiracy until one user posted a screenshot from a now-deleted forum thread, claiming MIA had uploaded a single photo days before the park visit that briefly showed a laptop screen in the reflection of her glasses. According to them, zooming into the image revealed an IP address traced back to a restricted government server. How a high school senior would have access to something like that? Nobody could say. But the thread was taken down within hours. And the user who posted it? Silent ever since. By this point, the story had crossed over from local news to full-blown trending on YouTube. People wanted answers. Some believed MIA was a whistleblower, a teen who'd accidentally discovered something and was now being silenced. Others were convinced she'd been recruited online by someone posing as a friend. Ava began receiving DMs from accounts she didn't recognize, some claiming they knew what really happened and others just asking for any detail, no matter how small. Jordan admitted in a later interview that he found a note in his locker days before Mia's disappearance. It wasn't signed, but it said, "If she says anything, they'll come for you too." He thought it was a prank. Now, he's not so sure. But here's where it gets even more twisted. As federal agents kept quiet and her digital trail stayed scrubbed, some unknown user, uploaded a short, pixelated video clip to an anonymous file-sharing site. The title? MIA. Before. It showed her, clearly, sitting at a computer, headphones on, eyes scanning something on screen. In the background, a voice, barely audible, says, "Don't let it go public yet." The clip lasts 9 seconds. That's all. But it was enough to set off alarm bells for anyone following the case. What was she looking at? Who was speaking? And most importantly, why was that clip uploaded after her accounts were wiped? Just when the story seemed like it couldn't get any stranger, a new complication surfaced, and it came from a place no one expected. In the days following Mia's disappearance from the amusement park, Ava, feeling overwhelmed and desperate for answers, began digging through her old texts and photos with MIA, looking for any detail they may have overlooked. That's when she remembered something odd MIA had said the night before the trip, while they were packing. They'd been going over outfits and joking about which rides would totally ruin their hair for pictures, when MIA casually mentioned that she didn't plan to bring her laptop because someone might be watching it. Ava had laughed it off at the time, thinking MIA was just being dramatic or joking around. But now, looking back, it didn't feel funny. It felt like a warning. So Ava did something risky. She drove to Mia's house while her parents were still out doing interviews and knocking on doors for any sign of their daughter. She used the spare key MIA had given her last year when they were working on a school project together. Inside Mia's room, everything was untouched, like she just stepped out for a second and would be right back. But the laptop, her silver MacBook that she used every day, was gone. Not hidden. Not locked away. Just missing. Ava checked drawers, under the bed, even inside a bin MIA used for off-season clothes. Nothing. And just as she was about to leave, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're not going to find what you're looking for there. Walk away." That message changed everything. Ava hadn't told anyone she was going to Mia's. She hadn't posted about it or shared her location, which meant someone was tracking her, either digitally or physically. The realization chilled her, but instead of backing off, it made her more determined to find out what was really going on. She started connecting with other people online who were deep into the MIA Caldwell story, including one user who claimed to have hacked into Horizon Hill's surveillance archives. He went by the alias Retina Zero and sent Ava a series of still frames pulled from the park's cameras. Most were grainy, low quality, but one stood out. MIA, about 20 minutes before getting on the Vortex, was seen handing something to a man near the pretzel cart. The item was too small to identify, maybe a flash drive, maybe a folded piece of paper, but the body language was tense. The man wore sunglasses and a plain black ball cap, his face angled just far enough away to make identification impossible. And here's the creepiest part, none of Mia's friends remembered seeing him. Not one. At this point, theories were everywhere. Some thought MIA had stumbled into something to do with government surveillance or whistleblower activity. Others were convinced this was a trafficking situation or some kind of recruitment gone wrong through a hidden dark web forum. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Jordan. Quiet, athletic, the type who kept to himself and rarely got involved in drama, Jordan revealed something shocking. A few months before the trip, MIA had confessed to him that she'd gotten involved in something she couldn't talk about, something she said would make her disappear if it ever came out. At first, he thought she was exaggerating. She didn't explain what it was or who it involved, only that it started with a message from someone claiming to be a tech recruiter for a secretive youth program. The person had reached out via a school email, pretending to offer an internship in cybersecurity. MIA thought it was legit. She even had a phone interview. But then the requests started, odd tasks, small code challenges that seemed to have real-world applications. Then she got access to a server. Then a second one. And then, she stopped talking about it altogether. The betrayal came next. Jordan admitted he wasn't the only one MIA had told. She'd also confided in someone from her old middle school, Layla Harding. Layla and MIA used to be best friends until a falling out over something neither of them ever spoke about again. But recently, they'd reconnected. According to Jordan, MIA had trusted Layla enough to send her screenshots of what she found on that server. Private communications. Encrypted files. Names. One file was labeled HZN_Vault, a chilling coincidence that echoed the name of the park itself, Horizon Hills. But when Ava and Micah reached out to Layla, she claimed she never got anything. She said she hadn't spoken to MIA in months, insisted they were still not close, and asked to be left out of it. But there was something off about her tone. Something rehearsed. Then came the final blow, Retina Zero vanished. His account was deactivated. Every message, every shared file, gone. Even his forum posts were scrubbed. No trace of his username on any of the usual boards. The last thing he posted, just hours before disappearing, was a message. She didn't just find something. She was part of it. That post was taken down minutes later. No one knew what it meant. Was MIA a victim or a collaborator? Was she being hunted or was she hiding something of her own? That question, more than anything, kept the mystery alive. Because just when everyone thought the trail had gone cold, Ava received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single photo, grainy and faded, taken from what looked like an old webcam feed. It showed MIA, again at a computer, but this time her reflection in the screen showed another face behind her. A man. The same one from the pretzel cart. Except this time, his face was visible. And he wasn't a stranger. Ava recognized Ava didn't sleep that night. After staring at the photograph over and over, the pieces in her mind refused to settle into any kind of logical pattern. The man behind MIA, clearly visible in the webcam reflection, was Mr. Kellerman, their junior-year technology teacher. He wasn't particularly memorable at first glance, the kind of teacher who kept to himself, never raised his voice, and always wore the same grey button-up tucked too neatly into khakis. But now, every little memory took on a darker hue. His quiet nature, the way he'd ask certain students to stay behind after class for extra help, and how he always seemed to be around when MIA would linger near the library's back computer labs. Ava remembered MIA once joking that Mr. Kellerman knew more about them than they knew about themselves. At the time, it felt like a harmless comment. Now, it echoed like a warning no one had understood. Before she could decide what to do with the photo, Ava received a message, this time in her school email. The subject line read, "Think twice." No body text, no signature, just an attachment labeled look_closely.move. Against her better judgment, she downloaded the video. It was low quality, jumpy, and looked like it had been recorded off a monitor using an old phone. But what it showed chilled her to her core. It was footage from inside the school library, date-stamped 3 weeks before MIA disappeared. MIA was seated at a desktop, headphones on, typing fast. Mr. Kellerman was behind her, not teaching, not speaking, just watching. And at one point, he leaned down and whispered something into her ear. MIA flinched, paused, and then slowly turned her screen away from view. The clip cut off seconds later, but the message was clear. Someone didn't want Ava asking questions. Someone wanted her to feel watched, intimidated, boxed in. And it worked, just enough to make her hesitate. What Ava didn't know was that she wasn't the only one being targeted. Micah had been going through his old group chats, hoping to recover a message MIA had sent him a few months ago. But when he logged in, the entire conversation history was gone. Not deleted, just reset, like it had never happened. No messages, no timestamps, no media. Just blank space. He reached out to the chat app support team, only to get a generic response that the logs had been purged in accordance with policy. But Micah wasn't new to tech, he was the go-to guy at school for fixing broken screens and unlocking phones, and he knew that kind of data doesn't just vanish. He dug deeper, scanning through system files on his own device and noticed something strange, a ping from an unfamiliar IP address, logged at the exact same time the chat was wiped. When he traced the address, it pointed to a private network owned by a data center less than 10 miles from Horizon Hills Amusement Park. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. Why would someone go to the trouble of erasing specific conversations between MIA and her closest friends? And how was this connected to a park that was supposed to be all about roller coasters and cotton candy? Unless, of course, the park itself was part of something else, something no one had ever questioned before. Maybe the name Horizon Hills was more than just branding. Maybe it was a front. The deeper they looked, the more inconsistencies they found. Micah discovered that the company listed as the park's owner, Veritask Holdings, had changed names 4 times in the last decade, each time after one of its properties experienced a reported technical breach. Ava looked into the park's recent renovations and found that a new security system had been installed only 6 months earlier by a government contractor known primarily for surveillance infrastructure, not entertainment. Then came the twist that flipped everything on its head. A second photo arrived, this time at Micah's house. No note, no envelope, just a single image dropped into his family's mailbox. It showed Layla Harding, the same girl who claimed she hadn't spoken to MIA in months, at the exact same pretzel cart, talking to the same man in the black hat who MIA had been seen with. The timestamp. 30 minutes after MIA had handed him the unknown object. It directly contradicted Layla's story. Either she was lying about not being there, or she was involved in whatever happened after. When confronted, Layla didn't deny being at the park. Instead, she broke down and said she'd been warned not to talk. She wouldn't say by whom, only that someone had shown up at her house the day after MIA disappeared. A man in a plain suit. He didn't show a badge. Didn't need to. He just asked if she remembered anything from that day and told her not to answer any unexpected messages. Before he left, he handed her a sealed envelope and told her, "If you ever think about talking to the others, read this first." Layla said she never opened it. She swore she didn't want to know what was inside. But now, with everything closing in, Ava and Micah convinced her to finally open it together. Inside was a single flash drive. No label. No instructions. Just a thin, black rectangle sitting in a nondescript plastic case. When they plugged it into Micah's laptop, the drive auto-launched a single folder titled Foresight. Inside were 6 video files, each named with different dates. The earliest file, dated almost 2 years before Mia's disappearance, opened with grainy security footage of a classroom, one that clearly belonged to their high school. In the video, Mr. Kellerman is talking to someone off-screen. The audio cuts in and out, but one phrase is clear: they're testing awareness thresholds. The kids don't even realize they're subjects. Ava slammed the lid of the laptop shut. None of them could breathe for a moment. This wasn't just about a girl who found something she wasn't supposed to. This wasn't just about a park or a server or a flash drive. This went deeper. Someone had been watching them for a long time, maybe years. And MIA? She hadn't just been the one to find out. She might have been part of it from the very beginning. But then Micah noticed something strange. One of the other video files wouldn't open. It required a password. And the file name? It was Mia's birthdate, plus the name Halcyon. None of them had ever heard that word before. When Ava searched for it online, the results weren't clear. Some said it was a code name tied to a federal research initiative. Others linked it to a closed facility in the Nevada desert, one supposedly connected to behavior tracking through immersive environments. The night after discovering the contents of the flash drive was the first time Ava genuinely felt fear settle into her bones, not the kind of fear you can shake off with a deep breath or a call to a friend, but the cold, consuming kind that latches onto your thoughts and makes you question everything. They had all agreed to sleep on it, to take a day and regroup before deciding what to do next. But Ava couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that folder name, Foresight, burning into her vision like a warning etched into the inside of her skull. The phrase awareness thresholds kept echoing in her head. What did that mean? Were they being monitored? Manipulated? Were they test subjects in something that had been running without their knowledge? She kept the flash drive hidden in the battery compartment of an old TV remote, afraid to plug it back in, afraid it might trigger something or someone. That night, she stayed up late in her room scrolling through every link, thread, and video she could find connected to the word Halcyon. Most of the results had been scrubbed or buried under pages of unrelated junk. But deep in a conspiracy subreddit with less than 100 followers, she found a comment on a dead thread from 3 years ago. It said, Halcyon was never about surveillance. It was about simulation. They test how much you can take before you break. The account that posted it had no profile picture, no post history, and was deactivated less than an hour later. It felt like a breadcrumb deliberately left behind, and for the first time, Ava wondered if MIA had ever truly escaped, or if she was still inside whatever this Halcyon protocol really was. The next morning, Ava's phone buzzed with a flood of missed calls and texts. All from Micah. All frantic. Layla was missing. Her mom had woken up to find her bed made, room untouched, phone left behind. No note. No sign of struggle. It was like she had vanished without ever leaving. The police treated it like a runaway situation at first, standard procedure for teens who disappear without a trace, but Ava and Micah knew better. Layla had been scared. She'd told them she was being watched. And she had just helped uncover something massive, something that felt way bigger than them. It was no coincidence that she vanished the same night they discovered the video of Mr. Kellerman. Something, or someone, was cleaning up the mess. Panic began to settle in as Ava's reality unraveled. At school, Kellerman wasn't in his usual classroom. Subbed out for personal leave. No one knew when or if he'd be back. His email bounced back. His phone went straight to voicemail. Ava tried to bring it up with another teacher, but the conversation shut down almost instantly. That's not something we're discussing, they said, voice stiff and eyes nervous. Even the principal looked tense, avoiding eye contact with any student who brought Kellerman's name into conversation. It was as if the school had collectively agreed to erase his existence. By the time Ava got home that afternoon, she was completely rattled. She checked all the blinds, double-locked the front door, and started scanning her phone for tracking apps she hadn't installed. She even dug out an old burner phone her cousin had given her just in case years ago. That's when she saw it, an unmarked white van parked just across the street. It hadn't been there that morning. No logos. Tinted windows. Engine off. Just sitting. Waiting. Ava stared out at it, heart pounding, unsure whether she should call someone or pretend she hadn't noticed. Then, slowly, the van started to back away, turned the corner, and disappeared. But the message had already been delivered loud and clear. They were watching. Again. Ava couldn't breathe. Her mind spiraled through every worst-case scenario. Was this what had happened to MIA? Had she been marked, tracked, intimidated until she disappeared? Was this Layla's fate now? Was Ava next? She called Micah, trying to sound calm, but her voice cracked halfway through. He was already one step ahead. We need to go somewhere we can talk, really talk. Not here. They agreed to meet at the edge of the city near the old train depot, long abandoned and off-grid. It was one of the few places left with no cameras, no cell towers, no digital eyes. If the rumors were true that they were part of some awareness experiment, then this was their only shot at speaking freely. But when Ava arrived, Micah wasn't there. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Nothing. No messages. No calls. She checked the burner phone. Nothing. Then, out of nowhere, her real phone buzzed. One notification, a text from an unknown number with just 4 words. "He's not your friend." Her heart dropped. She immediately tried to call Micah. Straight to voicemail. She texted. No reply. Her fingers trembled as she looked around, the shadows from the depot stretching longer as the sun dipped lower. She thought she was being careful. She thought they were still one step ahead. But now she wasn't sure of anything. Who had sent the message? Was it real? Or was someone trying to make her question everything? She didn't want to believe it, but the thought slithered in anyway. What if Micah had been playing both sides all along? What if he had brought Layla into this, only to help erase her? What if he had tipped off Kellerman that they'd opened the flash drive? The paranoia was no longer creeping in, it had swallowed her whole. As the sky darkened and the cold crept in, Ava's phone buzzed again. One final message. This time, with a video file. It was a clip of a surveillance camera feed from earlier that day. It showed Ava at her front door, checking the locks. And behind her, outside the window, just barely visible in the reflection, was someone standing in her backyard. Watching. Still. Silent. And just like that, she realized she wasn't just part of a mystery anymore, she was the next target. As the wind howled around the deserted train depot and Ava stood frozen, staring at the grainy surveillance video of her own home, she could feel every nerve in her body screaming at her to run. She didn't know where to go, just that she couldn't stay. But before she could even decide her next move, headlights cut through the darkness and swept across the rusting walls of the depot. A car pulled up fast, tires crunching over gravel, and Ava instinctively ducked behind one of the old support beams. The driver's door creaked open, and a familiar voice called out, breathless and sharp with urgency. It was Micah. He looked frantic, hair disheveled, face pale in the dim light. Ava, I'm sorry, he said before she even had a chance to ask where he had been. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The words didn't comfort her, they only made everything worse. She stepped out from behind the beam cautiously, one hand clutching the burner phone in her jacket. Where were you? I waited. I got a message about you. But before she could press further, Micah did something unexpected. He opened his backpack and pulled out the flash drive. The same one they had hidden the night before. This isn't the original one, he admitted quietly. I never told you there were 2. That moment was the first crack in everything Ava thought she understood. Micah explained that weeks before MIA vanished, she had asked him to hold onto a second drive, one that contained a full backup of whatever she had pulled from the HZN_vault. MIA had split the files, deliberately encrypting the more dangerous content, and told Micah to hide it somewhere no one would think to look. He chose to bury it inside an old GPS unit in his dad's shed, where it had sat, forgotten, until Layla vanished and the warnings started to escalate. Ava felt a bitter mix of betrayal and disbelief. All this time, Micah had let her risk everything, had watched her panic and unravel, knowing he held a piece of the puzzle the entire time. I thought I was protecting you, he said, his voice shaking now. MIA said if things started going wrong, I should wait. That it would make sense later. But then I saw Layla's picture at the pretzel cart. That's when I realized none of this is what we thought. Ava took the flash drive, her hands trembling as she inserted it into her laptop, breath shallow and quick. The folder opened with a chilling simplicity, just one file. A document titled Practice_Scenario_07A. Inside was a log timestamped entries, each one documenting their every move. Not just Mia's actions at Horizon Hills, but Ava's text conversations, Micah's search history, even a transcript of the phone call Layla had made to her cousin 3 days before she disappeared. Each line was marked with labels like stimulus response, emotional deviation, and subject compliance. This wasn't surveillance, it was scripting. It was as if everything they had been doing, everything they thought was chaos and discovery, had been anticipated. Micah leaned in, pointing to the earliest entry. Look at the date. This was written a year before MIA ever went to Horizon Hills. The reality hit Ava like a punch to the chest. Their actions hadn't just been watched, they had been manipulated. Or worse, simulated. The Halcyon Protocol wasn't just tracking awareness. It was creating narrative loops. Triggers, patterns, choices. Testing how far a subject could be pushed before they broke free of the illusion. And that's when it hit her. What if MIA never disappeared because she was in danger? What if she was removed because she figured it out? Before either of them could speak, Ava's phone buzzed again. A video message this time. No name, no sender. The preview was a dark screen, barely lit, but when she played it, her breath caught in her throat. It was MIA. Alive. Somewhere indoors, her hoodie pulled tight over her head, eyes sunken with exhaustion, but still focused, still intense. If you're seeing this, it means they've let you get far enough. But that's part of it. They need you to think you're close. They need you to believe in control. But it's all structure, your friendships, your memories, even your fear. Especially your fear. Mia's voice wavered as she continued. I didn't run. I didn't vanish. I was extracted. They're not studying how you react to the unknown. They're studying how long it takes you to realize you've never made a real decision in your life. Then the video glitched, and Mia's face flickered out. The screen turned white. A new sentence loaded on the screen, character by character, like an old terminal prompt. You are subject 03 of 07. Do not alert subject 04. Ava and Micah stared at each other, the implication crashing over them like a wave. One of their friends, or someone they thought was a friend, was still part of it. Maybe more than one. And worse, someone had been instructed not to be alerted. Someone who was still playing their role. Someone nearby. And for the first time since this began, Ava realized she wasn't trying to solve a mystery anymore. She was trying to break out of it. The ride home from the depot felt like it lasted a lifetime, even though it was less than 20 minutes. Ava and Micah barely spoke, their silence thick with the crushing weight of what they had just uncovered. Every traffic light, every passing car, every unfamiliar face on the sidewalk felt like a threat, like another pair of eyes watching their every move. And underneath that ever-present fear pulsed something even worse, uncertainty. Because if what MIA said in the video was true, if this entire experience had been orchestrated down to the choices they thought they were making, then Ava didn't even know if her reactions were her own anymore. And the most terrifying part wasn't that she had been manipulated. It was that some part of her might have known all along and ignored it anyway, because the truth was just too heavy to carry. Back at her house, Ava locked every door and drew every blind, paranoia sinking into her skin like cold rain. She wanted to believe they were safe for now, but nothing felt safe anymore. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clenched tight, trying to quiet the racing in her chest. She looked at Micah across the room, the same friend who had been by her side since the beginning, the one person who had never judged, never turned away, and now she had to question whether he was really there for her at all. Not because she didn't want to trust him, but because the file had said not to alert subject 04. And in that moment, the worst part was realizing she didn't even know who that meant. It could be Micah. It could be someone they hadn't even considered yet. But the idea that she might be sitting across from the person still actively working against her made her stomach turn. Then, as if the night hadn't taken enough from her already, her mom knocked on her door. Ava's heart sank the moment she saw her mother's face, pale, tear-streaked, holding something in her hand. A letter. No return address. It had arrived in the mailbox while they were gone. Inside was a printed note. Just a few lines, typed in a cold, clinical font. Your daughter is in possession of material connected to a national security investigation. If she continues to disseminate or decrypt the data, further action will be taken. You have 24 hours to comply. Ava's mom didn't say anything for a long time. She just stared at her daughter, as if seeing her for the first time. What is this, Ava? She whispered. What have you gotten yourself into? The fight that followed was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Ava tried to explain, tried to convince her mother that she hadn't done anything wrong, that she was being pulled into something far bigger than she could have imagined, but the more she spoke, the more her mom's face hardened with fear. Not anger. Fear. The kind that comes from knowing the world no longer works the way you thought it did. Her mom begged her to destroy the drive, to go to the police, to walk away. This isn't your fight, she said through clenched teeth, her hands shaking. This is the kind of thing people vanish for. And that was the moment Ava realized the real choice wasn't between curiosity and safety, it was between being silent and being free. But freedom, she now understood, came with a cost. Because right there, in the middle of her living room, she was handed an ultimatum by the people behind all of this: walk away, or lose everything. The threat wasn't subtle. If she didn't comply, her family might be targeted. Her records might be flagged. Her future could be taken apart quietly, without anyone even noticing. A failed college application here, a flagged account there, maybe even a staged arrest. Everything could be dismantled so surgically that no one would ever know it was connected to that one flash drive in her hands. But how do you walk away from something like this when it's already inside your head? When the girl who once sat beside you in math class is now trapped in a facility you can't find? When your memories are being rewritten before your eyes and your own mind becomes the battleground? Ava sat in the dark that night, listening to her mother cry quietly in the next room, the flash drive still warm in her pocket. Every instinct told her to destroy it, to protect what little she had left, but the part of her that had always needed answers, that had followed MIA into this mess in the first place, wouldn't let her. And just when she thought things couldn't become more tangled, the doorbell rang. Not a knock. Not a text. A full, deliberate press of the doorbell, loud and clear. Ava froze. Micah stepped toward the door, looked through the peephole, and turned back with a pale expression. "It's Mr. Kellerman," he whispered. "He's not alone." Ava's heart slammed against her ribs. She hadn't heard that name aloud in days, hadn't even allowed herself to think of the man behind so much of this. But now he was standing outside her house with someone else, another figure dressed in black, face obscured by shadows. They weren't hiding. They wanted to be seen. Ava's mother rushed into the room, demanding answers, but Ava couldn't speak. She was too focused on the envelope that had arrived hours earlier, the one that claimed her actions had consequences. Now the consequences had arrived in person. And then her phone vibrated one last time before the battery died. A new message from an unknown number: "You have until midnight." Then the real scenario begins. Ava didn't know what that meant. She didn't know if this was all still part of the simulation, or if it had crossed into something worse. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she was out of time. Ava didn't open the door. She couldn't. Her body was locked in place, every instinct screaming that letting Kellerman inside would be the final mistake, the kind that people didn't walk away from. Her mom was shaking now, phone in one hand, eyes flicking between Ava and the window like she was deciding whether to call the police or run. But Micah moved. He stepped away from the peephole and turned to Ava with a strange expression, not fear, not anger, but something more controlled, calculated, like he'd made a decision without telling her. "I'm going to talk to them," he said flatly, not asking, just informing her. Before she could stop him, he opened the door halfway and slipped out, shutting it behind him so quickly that Ava barely had time to register what was happening. Her mother started yelling his name, but Ava couldn't hear it. All she could hear was the blood pounding in her ears and the sound of her trust unraveling. She rushed to the upstairs window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see the scene below. Kellerman stood stiffly at the curb, hands in his coat pockets, flanked by two men in plain black jackets, earpieces barely visible. Micah stood directly in front of them, shoulders tense but not backing down. One of the men leaned in, said something she couldn't hear, and Micah nodded. Nodded. Not resisted. Not questioned. Just agreed. And then, in one horrifying moment, he handed something over. Ava couldn't see what it was, but the way Kellerman took it carefully, tucking it into his coat, told her everything she needed to know. It was the flash drive. Or worse, it was the second one. The one she hadn't known he'd kept a copy of. The one she thought had stayed buried. She stumbled back from the window, the room spinning like the ground beneath her had shifted. All this time, every whispered warning, every late-night decoding session, every promise that they were in this together had been a lie. Micah hadn't just betrayed her. He'd played her. He'd been in it from the start. Whether he was coerced or complicit didn't matter. The result was the same. Now the people behind the Halcyon Protocol had what they wanted, and she was officially the last piece of the puzzle that hadn't fallen into place. But then came the twist she hadn't seen coming. Her mom, still clutching her phone with trembling hands, stepped toward her and whispered, "Ava, there's something I didn't tell you." Her voice was low, broken, and filled with something Ava had never heard before: guilt. 3 years ago, before MIA, before all this, someone approached me. Said it was a government-funded youth program. They offered to enroll you without you knowing, said it was for early cognitive research. I thought it was harmless, like a personality study. They paid me to sign the forms. I didn't think, God, I didn't know it would be like this. The room seemed to tilt sideways as Ava absorbed her mother's words. This wasn't something that just happened to her. This was something that was done to her. Engineered. Planned. Approved. By the one person who was supposed to protect her. And now, every strange moment from the last few years snapped into focus: the odd questions during her doctor visits, the random surveys at school, the tech upgrade programs she'd been automatically enrolled in, even the sudden opportunity to take an experimental elective with Kellerman during sophomore year. It had all been part of a framework designed to monitor her responses, to record her every decision, her every hesitation. Halcyon wasn't some rogue operation, it was institutional. Embedded. Legal on paper, but buried in enough red tape and black ink to be invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. Outside, the car was pulling away. Micah climbed into the back seat, head down, never looking up once. Ava's breath came in ragged gasps as she watched the taillights vanish into the night. Her mother collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably now, but Ava couldn't focus on that anymore. Her world had cracked wide open. There was no going back. She opened her laptop, hands shaking, and reconnected the drive. Not the decoy, the original. The one MIA had hidden with a purpose. The one she hadn't opened fully. This time, when the screen loaded, she bypassed the main folder and searched deeper. There was a locked partition labeled access_denied_031. She tried Mia's birthday again. Nothing. She tried her own. Still nothing. Then she remembered the message: "You are subject 03 of 07. Do not alert subject 04. She typed in 03. Nothing. Then, in desperation, she tried 04. The partition opened. Inside was a full breakdown of every subject in the program. Ava scrolled, eyes darting over names and coded assessments, emotional resilience scores, simulated stress points, manipulation thresholds. She found her own profile and nearly vomited. It wasn't just logs. It was video feeds of her room, her phone screen, even her therapy sessions from months ago. And beneath her file, 6 others. MIA. Layla. A boy from her chemistry class who'd moved away suddenly last semester. 2 other students she barely knew, but remembered from freshman orientation. And subject 07? Marked status unknown. But subject 04, the one she was never supposed to alert, wasn't Micah. It was someone else. Someone she hadn't even suspected. It was her guidance counselor, Mrs. Everett. The woman who had always encouraged her to write down her thoughts, who always showed up when she was struggling, who once told her she just had a gift for reflection. Ava's entire mental health journey had been fed back into the Halcyon Protocol under the guise of support. Every journal entry, every doubt, every moment of vulnerability had been monitored, recorded, and analyzed for data. Ava's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't an experiment anymore. This was a system. A web. And it had been built around her entire life without her knowing. But now that she saw it, truly saw it, there was only one thing left to do. Find Subject 07. The only one who had somehow escaped without being tagged. The only one who might know what was coming next. Because Halcyon wasn't shutting down. It was evolving. And midnight was only hours away. Midnight came like a warning siren Ava couldn't hear but felt vibrating through every nerve in her body. The sky outside was dense with clouds, blocking even the moonlight, and the streets had gone eerily quiet, as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. She'd spent the last 2 hours tearing through every unlocked file on the flash drive, compiling a map of names, test groups, and behavioral triggers. But it wasn't enough. She still didn't know who had orchestrated all of this, who was behind the curtain pulling strings. And now, with Micah gone, her mother paralyzed by guilt, and the threats escalating by the minute, Ava understood that she had one final shot to get the truth. She had to go straight to the source. There was only one name that kept appearing in the internal correspondence buried in the drive: Everett, Est, always signed with the same tag, Level 3 Compliance Officer. Not just a counselor. Not just a handler. Everett had been part of the original development team behind the Halcyon Protocol. Ava knew where she lived, a faculty condo on the edge of the campus grounds. She'd been there once, sophomore year, for a mentorship dinner Everett had hosted for select students. It had felt strange even then, too curated, too rehearsed. Now she knew why. She walked through the empty campus with her hood up and her phone off, each step a silent dare against the surveillance that had ruled her life for the last 3 years. When she reached the door, it was already open. Not cracked. Open. And the light inside flickered like someone had been in a hurry to leave. Or maybe, to invite her in. Ava stepped across the threshold, every instinct on high alert. The air smelled faintly of ozone and burnt plastic, and a laptop on the kitchen table blinked with a single open window, a video feed. It was live. She leaned in, squinting at the screen, and felt her stomach drop. It was a feed of her house. The living room. Her mom asleep on the couch, an empty mug on the coffee table. Ava's breath caught as a figure stepped into frame. It was Kellerman. He stood there silently for a moment, staring down at her mom, before turning and walking back out of frame. Ava gripped the table so hard her knuckles turned white. This wasn't intimidation. It was leverage. It was the final threat: back off, or someone she loved would pay the price. But Everett hadn't fled. No, the woman was here. And she wanted Ava to know. A noise from the back room snapped Ava's attention. A quiet voice. Calm, like a therapist easing a patient into disclosure. You weren't supposed to get this far, Ava. The voice floated out of the hallway, and Everett emerged, dressed in black, eyes hollow but steady. She didn't seem surprised to see Ava. She looked almost relieved. But that's what makes you different, isn't it? That's what made you the anomaly. Ava's voice cracked as she asked the question that had been haunting her since Mia's disappearance. Why us? Why my life? Why pretend to help me just to tear everything apart? Everett walked slowly to the other side of the room, hands clasped, never looking away. Because the human mind resists change unless it believes it made the choice on its own. We needed a subject who would self-direct. Who would chase answers not because they were told to, but because they couldn't help it. That's the real test. The Halcyon Protocol isn't about surveillance. It's about narrative control. If we control your story, we control your reality. Ava laughed bitterly, a sound so raw it startled even herself. So you manufactured my pain. You turned my friends into experiments. What about MIA? Layla? Were they just test runs? Everett's expression tightened for the first time. MIA was a success. She made it out. We extracted her before she could destroy the model. Layla made it difficult. She wasn't ready. But you, Everett stepped closer, and her tone shifted into something colder. You're a liability. Because you're still asking questions. Ava took a shaky breath, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then why haven't you shut it all down? Why keep the program running if you already know how it ends? Everett's eyes narrowed, and that's when Ava saw it, the briefest flicker of doubt. Because we lost control of Subject 07. The name hit Ava like a thunderclap. The only one unaccounted for. The ghost in the system. She asked the question slowly, carefully. Who is Subject 07? Everett didn't answer at first. Then, with a quiet exhale, she whispered, "You've met them already. More than once. They're not who you think." Ava's mind scrambled, running through every possibility: Micah, her mom, one of the other students, but then it hit her like a punch to the chest. The boy from her chemistry class who'd moved away mid-semester. Quiet, observant, always 2 steps behind. He had been there when she'd had her first panic attack junior year. He'd helped her with a coding project once. She hadn't thought about him since. That was the point. He wasn't just another test subject. He had escaped. And now, he was rewriting the system. Suddenly the lights flickered and a loud tone buzzed through the apartment. The laptop screen blinked again, this time showing a completely different interface. A prompt appeared: Halcyon mainframe compromised. Extraction protocol reversed. Everett's face went slack with panic. No, she breathed. He couldn't have. Ava backed away as Everett lunged for the laptop, but it was too late. Files began auto-deleting in real time. Her entire infrastructure, the lies, the simulations, the manipulated lives, all collapsing in a cascade of corrupted data and broken code. Everett screamed in rage, but Ava didn't hear her. Her eyes were locked on the screen. A final message had replaced everything else. It was addressed to her directly: Ava, you were never the subject. You were the observer. Now you choose the ending. And in that instant, Ava understood. She had never been the test. She had been the control. The constant. The variable placed in proximity to chaos to see if she could be broken or if she would evolve. Halcyon hadn't underestimated her. It had built itself around her. But it was that very structure that had now unraveled from within. Everett collapsed to her knees as the apartment's power shut off completely. Outside, a car screeched into the parking lot. Ava didn't wait. She ran. Into the night. Into uncertainty. But this time, for the first time, she wasn't chasing answers. She was writing her own. And just when she thought it was over, her phone buzzed back to life in her pocket with a single notification. One final message. No name. No number. Just 6 words: Subject 08, program restart confirmed. Initiating. The morning after the collapse of Halcyon was colder than usual, not just in the air but in everything that remained. Ava walked along the narrow trail behind her old high school, the leaves crunching beneath her boots as the sunrise crept slowly over the tree line. It was the same path she used to take when she needed to think back when life had seemed hard for all the normal reasons, before her world unraveled into layers of surveillance, manipulation, and psychological warfare. In her pocket, she carried the last drive. Not the one Kellerman had taken, not the corrupted backup, but the one MIA had hidden inside the GPS unit, now decrypted, decoded, and burned clean of every exploitable trace. All that remained was a single video file, one Ava had watched exactly once and couldn't bear to delete. MIA, sitting at a train station in the middle of nowhere, whispering the truth into the camera with the soft sadness of someone who had already accepted they wouldn't be believed. She hadn't been running from anything. She had been running toward something Ava only now understood: a choice. The FBI never issued a public statement about Halcyon. No headlines. No press conferences. No official files declassified for the public to dissect. If you searched hard enough, all you'd find were vague mentions of a discontinued behavioral study, an internal ethics review, and a few quiet resignations from educational consultants and data security contractors. Everett had vanished completely. Her condo was cleared out within hours of Ava escaping that night, and no one had seen her since. Kellerman, however, resurfaced, but not as a villain. He took a sudden position as a visiting expert in behavioral AI at a Silicon Valley think tank, his past wiped clean of any association with youth experimentation. Micah returned 2 weeks later with a shaky excuse about a family emergency and a nervous smile that Ava didn't even acknowledge. He never mentioned the program, the flash drive, or his betrayal. He didn't have to. The silence between them said everything. Ava never told her mom what had happened after she left that night. There were some things that couldn't be repaired with explanations. Her mother knew enough to look at Ava differently now, with a mix of fear and reverence that neither of them spoke aloud. Their relationship had changed, not because of the betrayal, but because the illusion of safety had been permanently shattered. There were no more talks about curfews or college essays. Just quiet breakfasts and long, uncertain stares. The 7 subjects listed in the files were never brought together. Some disappeared like Layla, erased so thoroughly that even yearbook photos went missing. Others, like Subject 07, the ghost in the code, were never confirmed. Ava received a single package weeks later with no return address, containing only a handwritten note that said, "I didn't escape. I just changed the rules." Alongside it was a folded page from one of her old notebooks, the one she thought she'd lost freshman year. It had been scanned, annotated, and fed into a file labeled Narrative Catalysts, Ava Brooks. It was dated 2 years before she'd even heard the word Halcyon. The truth was never simple. There was no final showdown, no courtroom drama, no sweeping justice. What Ava had uncovered wasn't something that could be dismantled by the truth alone, because the world outside didn't want the truth. It wanted stories. And Halcyon had proven that whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome. That was the program's real legacy, not the data or the simulations, but the realization that people could be shaped without ever realizing it. That fear, love, ambition, and even defiance could be predicted if the right pressure points were applied. In time, Ava did find a kind of peace, not in forgetting, but in choosing how her story would be told from now on. She started writing again, but not fiction. She documented everything, every name, every test, every breadcrumb that had led her from confusion to clarity. She encrypted her files and scattered copies across decentralized servers, not to expose anyone yet, but to keep the flame alive. She didn't need viral videos or trending hashtags. Not yet. She just needed to remember what it had felt like when she finally saw through the lie. One afternoon, as she sat alone in the library, she found a book she didn't remember checking out. No barcode. No title on the spine. Inside, a single photograph had been taped to the first page, a ride photo from Horizon Hills, the one taken seconds before the drop. She was in the back row, laughing. MIA was beside her, mid-scream, full of life. But there, in the front row, partially hidden by the glare, was a familiar face Ava hadn't noticed before. Everett, sunglasses on, smiling directly into the lens. There was no note. No explanation. Just that one image, a perfect metaphor for everything Halcyon had built, watching, always watching, even in moments that felt innocent and real. Ava closed the book, tucked it into her backpack, and walked out into the fading light with a calm she hadn't felt in months. The system hadn't ended. It had adapted. But so had she. And as she crossed the street, her phone buzzed quietly. A new message, from an unknown sender. No threats. No commands. Just one question: are you ready to begin the next phase? Ava didn't answer right away. She looked up at the skyline, the glass towers catching the last rays of the sun, and smiled. She didn't know what phase came next, but this time, she'd be the one writing it. And somewhere out there, someone was watching. Just like before. Only now, she was watching back. And the final result. A Reddit post from 6 months ago, now deleted, with only the title visible in a cache. If you're seeing this, it's already too late. Halcyon is not a place, it's a protocol. And with that, the story took another terrifying turn. Immediately. He was one of their teachers.